High-value it girls have hobbies.
You can't just go through life not having hobbies anymore, okay? It's time to change that.
How to be more attractive in 2024 just by expanding your hobbies.
Maturing is actually realizing that you aren't depressed. You just need a hobby.
If you have any of these hobbies, then you're chic, classy, and very elegant.
You're bored of eating healthy? Aren't you bored of being fat? If you're bored, go find a hobby. Go find something to do. Go find anything else besides trying to decide what should you eat.
All girls have hobbies.
I feel like cool hobbies have died now. If you ask someone what they do in their free time, it's like, yeah, I watch Instagram reels. I don't want to be 50 years old with no talents and no skills. So here's a list of hobby ideas that I think make you super cool and interesting and low-key mysterious.
Okay, I have two things to say. First, hobbies are in. These days, everybody has at least 3, and if you don't, congratulations, you're officially boring. Second, apparently, if you don't spend your weekends horseback riding, playing tennis, or like casually skiing in the Alps, you're doing hobbies wrong. Because according to the internet, the only hobbies worth having are the ones that cost a small fortune. Lately, I've been seeing an influx of content around cool girl hobbies, hot girl hobbies. Someone please tell me if there's an actual difference between the two. And my personal favorite, feminine high value hobbies, whatever that even means. And surprise, surprise, the hobbies that will allegedly make you more sophisticated and elevated and elegant just happen to require a trust fund. The thing is, social media being social media took yet another good thing that used to be about joy and creativity and turned it into an aesthetic flex fueled by consumerism. So today let's talk about the rise of hobbycore, why hobbies are suddenly so trendy, why we're preaching getting off our phones while still documenting every moment for content.
Hey, what do you like to do besides be on your phone? What are your hobbies? What do you like to do in your free time? Do you like to read? Do you like to write? Have you done any arts and crafts lately? Have you picked up a new hobby? Maybe you want to learn to play an instrument. Whatever you do, don't do it on here. Find something that you enjoy doing that isn't on this device, okay? We need to put this thing down.
And how even our free time is now meticulously curated for social media. Let's go. First, I want to start with unpacking how we actually got here and why hobbies are so in right now. And I recently watched a video by Katie Robinson, I will link it down below of course, where she explored this exact topic but more in terms of its connection to fashion world. And in it, she actually made an extremely interesting point about how this recent talk about the lack of personal style has played a huge role in the rise of hobbies and hobbycore. For context, over the past few months, all everyone has been talking about, at least on my side of TikTok, is how everyone is boring and no one seems to have a personal style these days.
It just occurred to me the reason why so many younger people are having a hard time developing a sense of true style that is like really personal and intimate is because that requires having interests outside of the internet and other people's opinions. People with great personal style are quiet as it's kept. Some of the most learned art patrons and fans that exist. They go to museums, they read books, they're ceramicists, they are teaching themselves how to paint. They are engaging in discourse about why they love and do not love these things with nuance. They seek out television and film beyond what other people tell them to enjoy. The objects of their interest span generations and eras and cultures. And I just fully think a lot of the girls, even with amazing tastes, mind you, are struggling to build personal style because they do not have personal interests. Like, you bitches need to get hobbies and find out what your tastes really are based on what kind of titillates you off rip.
The idea is that in order to stand out and to avoid looking like a copy-paste version of everyone else, think sleek buns, glossy lips, Adidas Sambas, and leopard print jeans, right? You need to have a life and actual interests and things that you do outside of scrolling and shopping on social media. Who would have thought? In other words, you need to have hobbies.
Just as bag charms started as a trend that could show your personality and quickly became a massive trend that everyone was buying mass-produced items for to show a curated personality online, hobbies have almost become bag charms that you can collect to add on to your personality that you're selling to other people on TikTok.
Again, it's a very coherent, interesting video, so I would highly recommend you to check it out, especially if you love fashion. But I also want to quickly mention a few additional possible reasons of why we have been seeing such a significant rise of hobbycore. First, it is so clear to me that the rise of hobbies is a direct rejection of this idea that our every moment must be productive. It's a pushback against hustle mentality that we all lived through when we all prided on our ambitions and treated burnout as a badge of honor almost. Might be hard to believe now, but for the longest time, the concept of having a hobby, something done for pure joy without any monetary or career-driven goal, was no more than a nostalgic idea and almost a relic of the past. And even for those of us who had hobbies, there was always this underlying notion that you should turn this hobby into a side hustle, into some sort of additional source of income. And people would ask, why don't you sell your art? Or why not open an Etsy shop? And that toxic mindset left no room for activities that existed for pure relaxation and enjoyment. And while that pressure for sure still exists today, at least to some degree, I think there has definitely been a shift, because today it's more acceptable to treat hobbies as a break from productivity and also resist this urge to turn them into business ventures that will eventually inevitably feel like work. Second, and perhaps the most obvious reason, is the state of today's world. Economic and political anxieties of our time, rising inflation, the cost of living crisis, and skyrocketing rent prices. And all of this made people shift their focus to smaller, more affordable joys, such as a cup of coffee, a new book, a puzzle, or even just a new lipstick. But besides that, these circumstances also predispose people to engage in escapism, using hobbies as a form of retreat that offers a small sense of control and comfort in an increasingly chaotic and crazy world.
You guys, stop overcomplicating it. If you have low energy and you want to feel better every single week, all you have to do is just integrate a simple, easy hobby before or after work, and you are going to feel so much better.
Hobbies most certainly are also a symptom of the cozy trend. Over the past few years, we have seen an explosion of coziness, from cozy gaming like Animal Crossing and Stardew Valley to low-stakes fantasy novels such as Legends and Lattes, and also the rise of comfort hobbies like knitting, crocheting, or gardening. And this was particularly prominent during pandemic, when people fantasized about escaping modern life and returning to simpler, more sustainable existence through trends like cottagecore and slow living. And lastly, recently there has been a noticeable pushback against doom scrolling online. Feels like the pendulum has started swinging the other way, and I definitely feel the same way. You know, for a while this hee hee ha ha bite-sized content on TikTok was fun, but I found myself growing increasingly tired of it, to be honest. And I definitely started, even unconsciously, seeking out longer form content again, and also trying to find hobbies and activities to do instead of just mindlessly being on my phone all the time. And there's definitely this new trend online, ironic I know, that is all about escaping doom scrolling and brain rot, and the importance of being an active participant of your life. And honestly, I'm happy to see that trend. I mean, how can you not be, right? To quote psychologist Dr. Joe Perkins, in a lot of ways, the slow process of making something is the antidote to the fast-moving, instant gratification dopamine hit of the online world on which today's young people grew up. Delayed gratification comes with a sense of accomplishment and a boost in confidence. As humans, we are not designed to live smooth, easy, convenient lives. We are born scientists. We want to discover, learn, and figure things out. Having constant access to instant gratification denies us access to our brains. It's no wonder people are starting to reject it. Okay, but now let's circle back to the topic of this high value hobbies and this idea that engaging in these extremely expensive and, let's be honest, inaccessible to a lot of people activities will somehow make you more sophisticated, more disciplined, and more elevated. Right off the bat, let's not pretend that hobbies haven't always been tied to class and social status, because in itself, the ability to dedicate time and financial resources to a certain craft is first and foremost a luxury that not everyone possesses. Historically, the wealthy were expected to cultivate refined interests, so playing an instrument, painting, embroidery, or mastering multiple languages. And these weren't just hobbies, they were markers of social standing. May I kindly remind you of the conversation between Lizzie Bennet, Mr. Darcy, and Caroline Bingley about what it means to be an accomplished woman.
I think it's amazing you young ladies have the patience to be so accomplished. You all paint tables and play the piano and embroider cushions.
You must have a thorough knowledge of music, singing, drawing, dancing, and the modern languages to deserve the word.
Of course, you must improve our mind by extensive reading.
Of course, this also speaks volumes about expectations placed on women in society, but let's just not go down that route, at least not right now. But I think this idea discussed in Pride and Prejudice applies as much today, just that the modern accomplished woman is the one who goes to Pilates, follows a 10-step skincare routine, bakes sourdough bread, and learns 2 languages, all while having a successful career and an aesthetically pleasing social media platform. And I'm not gonna lie, as someone who can only afford Pilates once a week in a city where Pilates classes are still priced relatively affordable, all of these videos look and sound a bit ridiculous to me. I kind of have to roll my eyes every time I see horseback riding, ice skating, or like ballet just being casually mentioned. That's how I know that the person curating that list is either in a very different tax bracket than I am, or they're creating these videos just purely for aesthetic purposes. Listen, I would love to go horseback riding, and in an ideal world where I have access to a stable, expensive gear and paid lessons, I can actually see myself being a pretty damn good equestrian, but I cannot do that, and I would guess neither can you. And at its core, this is just another case of social media normalizing things that are only ever accessible to the ultra wealthy while making you feel bad for not having them. You cannot just travel to Bali to surf on a whim. You cannot go golfing every Saturday, and you cannot build yourself a whole ass home library just because you're at Fourth Wing on a random Tuesday and it reignited your love for reading. And guess what? Regular Hannahs and Sarahs and Matthews down the road cannot do it either. But social media creates this illusion that everybody else is living their most luxurious life and that the grass is greener on the other side and that you are the only one missing out. I know this is a bit of a tangent, but I think it's important to remind ourselves from time to time that even the ability to have a hobby is a privilege in itself. Not everyone has time and money and mental bandwidth to dedicate hours to a certain activity. Even hobbies that seem more accessible, like say reading or knitting, still require free time and tons of it. And this is something that a lot of overworked and financially struggling people simply do not have. I mean, I have all kinds of simple hobbies, right? But the only reason I'm able to read as much as I do, or do puzzles, or learn a new language, or even film this video right now is because I have a relatively relaxed remote job. I'm not exhausted 24/7, and I have the time and energy to dedicate to these things, and that in itself is a huge privilege. Yes, of course, it would be absolutely stupid not to take advantage of the privileges you have, but it is just as much important to recognize and acknowledge them. Another thing I wanted to discuss is this idea that hobbies have turned into something to be performed rather than simply enjoyed. Hobbies were once deeply personal activities, things we did in private for no one but ourselves. But in the era of social media, it seems like even leisure has become a performance, and instead of simply enjoying an activity, there is an underlying pressure to present it in a way that's aesthetic, engaging, and shareable. And I think a lot of this ties back to TikTok and its low barriers to entry, which has made content creation more accessible than ever, because more and more people, like regular people, are creating content today, and they're approaching everything they do with this influencer mindset, almost setting up camera angles, curating the perfect lighting, and editing clips to make an activity look completely effortless. And look, I have heard this performativeness conversation before. It's very familiar to us in the bookish spaces, because for the past like 3-4 years there has been so much buzz and talk about people reading purely for aesthetic purposes rather than because they truly love books. Yeah, I think I've seen this film before and I didn't like the ending. Now, there are certainly different ways to look at this issue. Say you're filming yourself coloring or knitting. Does that mean that as soon as the camera turns off, you no longer engage in this activity? I don't know, I just find it hard to believe that most people fake everything for their 15 seconds of TikTok fame. But also, I'd be the first one to tell you that filming yourself doing anything really is work. Deciding your camera angles and setting up your tripod and changing the angles halfway through, etc, etc. I'm sure all of that affects how you interact with the hobby itself, because half of your mind is constantly on the camera and on the content that you're creating. Making videos for social media is a hobby in its own right, or even a job for some people. Anytime you film yourself doing a hobby, you're engaging in social media and content production just as much as you're engaging in this hobby itself. So there is definitely a certain irony when people are talking about getting off the phones in their hobbycore TikToks, and no less irony in us consuming that hobbycore content while being on our phones. And you know what? Full disclosure, I have been toying with the idea of filming a video about hobbies myself, as I do have quite a lot of them. Yeah, I know. And I made this necklace, for example. Shameless plug, check my Etsy shop down below. Kidding. I'm just kidding, don't click out. But regarding that video, I just kept pushing and pushing it away, and only when I started researching for this video was I able to understand why. It's because I honestly didn't want to bother with setting up a camera and making everything look aesthetic, because guess what? It never is. You're making a necklace and beads just go flying everywhere and there's a string snapping on you, and none of that is an aesthetic video material, but it's for sure a nice gathering with friends and laughter material. And I don't know, I guess I almost didn't want to ruin that by bringing it online. And same goes for like puzzling. I wanted to remain this cozy evening activity that we do with my husband, and I want painting my nails to remain my me time, okay? Watch me being a complete hypocrite and still filming that video about hobbies in a couple of months. I don't know, as someone who has already turned one of my most long-standing and favorite hobbies, which is reading, into content, and who has seen firsthand how reading for creating content can negatively affect you, which is a topic for a whole another video, okay? I'm just, I guess, a bit apprehensive about doing the same to other interests of mine. And of course, there's something to be said about the whole consumerism side of hobbycore, because hobbies used to be about doing, but now they often start with buying. Before you even paint, crochet, or start a new sport, there is this expectation online that you need the right equipment, aesthetic supplies, or even the full starter kit to begin. And the fact that TikTok itself has completely transformed from a social media platform into a fully fledged shopfront doesn't help either, because there every trend, aesthetic and hobby comes with a curated list of must-have items, the tools, outfits and accessories you need to be part of the community, which the creator of course conveniently linked through their TikTok shop or Amazon storefront. It is as if every hobby now has an entry fee, a price that you have to pay just to feel like you're truly participating. As a result, instead of just picking up a hobby and slowly learning it, people get stuck in the purchasing phase, constantly looking for the right tools and accessories and gear, and that is why I think we see so many people collecting hobbies rather than just practicing them. Also, beware of the fact that hobbies can turn into yet another way to justify spending money online. The act of buying, say, the right supplies can easily become a hobby itself, because if you think about it, there is a dopamine rush in this entire process. Browsing for the right tools, adding them to your cart, tracking your package, and finally unboxing it. Each step feels productive, like you're already engaging with the hobby. But once that initial excitement fades, the doing part of the hobby becomes less urgent and almost less attractive. Because let's be honest, actually practicing a hobby isn't as instantly gratifying as browsing through TikTok and hitting add to cart. Doing even the most simple hobby requires effort, time, and patience, and those are things that don't provide the same instant reward as an impulse buy. So as much as we all like to talk about getting off our phones and reducing consumption and being active participants in our own lives, I am not so sure that we are always achieving those goals that we set out for ourselves, if you know what I mean. And one last thing I want to mention before I go is how I noticed one curious thing, and that is how a lot of people started mentioning socializing itself as a hobby. Hanging out with friends and going on coffee dates and attending book clubs, or even just texting in group chats, has been reframed as an intentional activity rather than something that just happens naturally. I mean, there has been a lot said about how we are in the middle of loneliness epidemic. Studies show that Gen Z and millennials report higher level of social isolation than previous generations, with many struggling to make or maintain friendships in adulthood. Of course, remote work is more and more present in our lives, and urban isolation is a thing. There's also a rapid decline of third places like libraries or community centers or even nightclubs, for God's sake. As a result, people are now deliberately seeking out social interactions the same way they would take up a new craft or sport. Making and keeping friendships is no longer seen as something that just happens. It is something that requires effort, planning, and even a certain skill. And I don't have anything definitive to say here necessarily. I just thought this was extremely fascinating, and there's definitely a lot to think about when it comes to this topic. I recently also read the Substack titled "Do You Actually Have Friends?" that talks about how modern friendships have become performative. Yeah, I know. And how they are centered around curated catch-ups in aesthetic cafes rather than true, genuine connection. And it certainly got me thinking, but once again, this is like a topic for a whole another video. Regarding hobbies and hobbycore, that was it from me for today. And I realized that this is yet another problem that exists on the internet only, and that only chronically online people are affected by. But I obviously still love diving into different trends and unpacking them. And at the end of the day, even if 0.001% of those people who participate in hobbycore trend find true enjoyment and passion through activities and hobbies outside of their phones and social media, I would say that's a win. But let me know your thoughts, of course, and if you enjoyed this video, as always, please consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to my channel to never miss an upload from me. And stay safe, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye!